My name is Olivia Carter and I am 32 years old. Even today, the smell of roasted turkey tightens my jaw because it takes me back to one very specific night. A night when my own brother stood up at Thanksgiving dinner and calmly announced that our parents had secretly handed him the company I built and that I was getting nothing. We were all sitting around my parents' long oak dining table, the same table where years earlier I had balanced my laptop, stacks of invoices, and contracts while everyone else watched football in the living room. Back then, the candles on the table flickered quietly, while I worked late into the night trying to turn an impossible dream into a real company. That night, those same candles were burning again, but something in the air felt different, heavy, sharp, like a storm that had already decided where it would strike. My brother, Ethan Carter, cleared his throat. He stood slowly, straightening the sleeve of his expensive tailored suit the way he always did when he wanted attention. Conversations faded. Forks stopped moving. The entire table turned toward him. He lifted his glass and spoke loudly, confidently, like someone giving a victory speech. Before we eat, I just want to thank Mom and Dad for believing in me and officially handing me the company. A few people blinked in confusion. Then he smiled and added the sentence that cut straight through the room. Olivia won't be involved anymore. For a moment, everything went silent, the kind of silence where even breathing feels loud. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, not because I was surprised. The truth is, betrayal has a scent of its own. Cold, metallic, familiar. Somewhere deep down, I had known something like this might happen. What hurt wasn't the words, it was the way he chose to say them. At Thanksgiving, in front of everyone. In front of cousins, aunts, uncles, people who had watched me build that company from nothing. I slowly turned my eyes toward my parents. They didn't look at me. My mother, Linda Carter, carefully dabbed her lips with a napkin like she was cleaning something invisible. My father, Robert Carter, stared at the grain of the wooden table as if the answer to everything was hidden inside it. Not one of them said a word when my brother repeated that I was getting nothing. Nothing, as if the word itself had already been decided somewhere behind closed doors. Meanwhile, Ethan continued speaking, filling the silence with his own version of the story. He talked about vision and leadership and taking the company to the next level. He talked about stability and responsibility as if he had been there from the beginning, but he hadn't been. I remembered the real beginning. A tiny studio apartment with cracked windows that let winter air creep inside. A borrowed desk that wobbled every time I typed. Cheap coffee that tasted burnt but kept me awake while I worked through the night. I remembered landing my very first client by promising a turnaround I barely knew how to deliver. I remembered negotiating contracts while my hands trembled under the table. I remembered the weeks when payroll came first and my own rent came second because I refused to let my team down. While I was doing all that, my brother was traveling, finding himself, using money our parents quietly gave him. Yet there he was now, standing at the head of the table like the hero of a story he had never written. Around the room, relatives shifted in their chairs. My Aunt Patricia glanced at me carefully. My cousin Daniel coughed into his napkin. Everyone felt the tension, but no one wanted to step into it. Because family dinners have a strange way of turning into courtrooms where everyone watches, but no one wants to be the first witness. The silence almost begged me to do what I had always done before. Stay quiet, smile politely, swallow the insult, but something inside me had changed long before that dinner. I picked up my glass of wine and took a slow sip. The cool glass touched my lips, and for the first time that night I felt something steady rise inside me. Courage, not loud courage, quiet courage. The kind that waits patiently for the exact moment it needs to appear, because in that instant the words formed clearly in my mind, the sentence that would shift everything. My brother stood up at Thanksgiving and announced our parents had secretly given him the company I built and that I was getting nothing. So I set my glass down gently. I looked straight at my father, and I said calmly, "Should I tell them now or do you want to?" The question landed like a plate shattering on the floor. For the first time that evening, my father looked directly at me, and the panic in his eyes told me everything. He tried to speak. His mouth opened, then closed again. Finally, he muttered something about timing, about family, about gratitude, but the room had already shifted. The attention that had been centered on my brother slowly turned toward me. I could feel years of silence peeling away. I remembered the emails I had saved, the legal documents I insisted on signing even when my parents told me we didn't need formalities between family. I remembered the ownership clauses I added late at night because I trusted paper more than promises. I remembered something else too. My brother's name was nowhere on the documents that mattered. And suddenly I understood something very important. Their entire plan depended on one thing: my silence. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't need to. Sometimes calm truth is louder than anger. I let the silence stretch long enough that even the turkey on the table seemed to cool. Then I asked again, gently but firmly. Should I tell them now or do you want to? Ethan's confident smile began to crack, and in that moment I felt something new bloom inside me, control. The room held its breath as I began speaking. I explained that the company had never been a family project the way people like to describe it. It had started when I was 24 years old. Alone, with a loan I repaid myself. Every single early contract listed me as founder and sole owner. My parents only became involved later, offering advice that slowly turned into pressure. Pressure about decisions. Pressure about leadership. Pressure about giving my brother a role he had never earned. I explained how his sudden promotion had happened while I was traveling to finalize the largest expansion deal in our company's history, behind my back. I watched faces around the table slowly change as details replaced assumptions. Ethan interrupted angrily, accusing me of exaggerating. My mother tried to stop the conversation, insisting that Thanksgiving was about togetherness. But I calmly reminded them that they had chosen this exact moment to announce I was getting nothing. Togetherness built on lies isn't peace, it's control. Then I reached into my bag and placed a thick folder on the table. I slid it slowly toward my father. You can explain the signatures, I said quietly, or I will. Inside the folder were copies of incorporation papers, equity agreements, and email confirmations clearly acknowledging my sole ownership. My father opened the folder. As he read the pages, his shoulders slowly sank forward. Across the table, Ethan's confidence melted into anger. A relative gasped softly. Someone whispered, "This looks bad." Because it was bad, very bad. I explained that I had discovered their attempt to transfer control weeks earlier. I had already spoken with legal counsel. I had only waited until Thanksgiving because part of me hoped they would choose honesty before spectacle. But since they hadn't, I was done protecting feelings at the cost of my future. The room erupted, voices overlapped. Accusations flew across the table. Ethan insisted our parents had promised him everything since childhood. My parents claimed they were only trying to keep the peace between us, but I repeated one sentence calmly, again and again. Peace without fairness is just forced silence. Eventually, my Uncle Michael stood up and told everyone to stop talking. He said something simple. Facts matter more than pride. And in the quiet that followed, my father finally said the truth out loud. The company was legally mine. Any attempt to give it away would fail. They had hoped pressure would make me agree. Hearing those words felt like a heavy door closing behind me. Final, irreversible, I stood up from the table. I thanked everyone for listening. Then I said the rest would be handled by lawyers, not leftovers. I put on my coat and walked out into the cold night air. My heart was racing, but my spine was straight. For the first time in years, I felt light. The weeks after that dinner were messy. There were angry messages, awkward apologies, and long stretches of silence, but the outcome was clear. My brother lost the illusion that the company belonged to him. My parents lost the leverage they believed family loyalty gave them, and I gained something far more valuable than an apology: clarity. The company continued to grow under leadership chosen for competence, not blood, and I learned something that night I will never forget. Family loyalty does not mean accepting betrayal as tradition. Now, when people ask me if I regret speaking up at that table, I think back to the flickering candles, the untouched turkey, and the moment I calmly asked, should I tell them now or do you want to? Because that single question changed everything. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to disappear from your own story. And if this story meant something to you, if you've ever been pushed aside, underestimated, or told you were getting nothing after giving everything, then stay with this channel. Like this video. Subscribe to the channel, and keep listening to stories that remind you of one simple truth. No matter how powerful the lie may seem, the truth always finds its seat at the table in the end.